But this is the problem with the so-called America First policy actually supporting prevention programs in other places is America First. That is how you protect cattle here, how you protect people here, how you protect this country, how you protect the world. That's why the phrase global health exists. Hey there, fellow nerds. Welcome to another episode of The Present Illness, the podcast where two physicians try to make sense of a world that is really febrile, on the verge of seizures, and definitely underdiagnosed. I'm Arghavan Salles, a surgeon scientist and your friendly neighborhood doom scroller in residence.
And I'm Alyssa Burgart, an anesthesiologist and bioethicist who tracks news and health law like their EKGs, full of spikes and surprises. The Present Illness is where we dig into public health, politics, culture, and ethics with a scalpel in one hand and a meme in the other. As a note to our listeners, we often talk about topics that can be tough and intense, so take care while listening.
Big thank you to everyone listening, and some extra love to our subscribers and those who follow us on any of our platforms. And a special warm welcome to anyone who just stumbled in from hearing about the death of Mahjong Satrapi.
Yeah, it was really sad to hear. When you told me, I went and picked up my copy of Persepolis, which just I feel like was such an incredible work. I think it came out in 2000. It got made into a film in
Mhm.
2007. And like, just what a brilliant, brilliant woman.
Just an incredible artist, and I don't know if people appreciate like how much that work in particular
Mm-hmm.
meant to the Iranian community. So, for folks who haven't watched the film or read the graphic novel, it's about her experience having left Iran at the age of, I think, 9 or 10. And she left in the 1980s. So, she was there after the revolution. And so, she recalls experiences of going to school and the way the various aspects of the government interacted with the people at that time, and especially with girls, talking about, hair coverings and all the things that people are familiar with, but her own personal experience of that. And then having left Iran at such a young age to go to Europe and then being on her own, trying to make sense of the world. And it's both like a coming of age story, but also a lot about the culture of Iranians and what happened with the revolution in 1980. And it's just such a powerful work. The animated film was nominated for an Oscar the year that it came out. And she's been a really, really powerful voice for Iranians and, in particular, Iranian women. She's been a huge advocate for human rights in Iran, has been really vocal, about the woman life freedom movement and also all the massacres that we discussed back in January and all of that. So I know that any Iranian people who saw that news today are probably devastated. I mean, she and her work have been
Mm-hmm.
so impactful
Mm-hmm.
for us and helping the rest of the world kind of understand a little bit more about what our experiences have been. And it's just a really bright light that's lost.
Yeah. And I think for, so many people like myself were like, I knew Iranian people. I went to school in Glendale for a little while. There's a big Iranian population there, and but this work, and in particular the graphic novel, was just such an accessible way into that world and to better understand, kind of what had happened, and um, in such a humanizing way. Because of course, in the early 2000s, it wasn't exactly a great time to be from the Middle East and be in the United States, and so I think that. Um, the work served not only, I think it ended up serving a lot of functions during that particular time and continues to obviously be super important. So it was really sad to hear about that. And I hope, though, that with her passing, that there's a new generation of people who learn about her work and then discover it themselves.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I think she, for folks who don't know much about her husband passed away last year, and I think that loss was really hard for her. And you know, I don't know that there's an afterlife, but I hope that has found some peace.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on a sunnier note, can I read you a nice thing that somebody wrote about us on the internet?
Please, yes.
So, this is a listener shout out. This was a message that we received in our account on Instagram. Hello. I just wanted to say I really like your podcast with an exclamation point. And that's from Rochelle. It's from
Well, thank you
Rochelle
so
on
much.
Instagram. Yeah. I actually was out, I was at an event at my kid's school yesterday, and someone that I did not know was a listener came up to me and they were like, I love the podcast. And I was like, please write us a review.
I know, that's what we need so that people can find us. It's so hard to, get pushed out into the podcast algorithm. It's
Sure. Well, but
very
also, I think that if you love the podcast, we love you. And
yeah,
so we would love to hear what you have to say about the podcast and share it with others. Let us shout you out. Send us these
absolutely.
messages. We would love to receive them. So
Yes.
anyway, thanks Rochelle for your delightful message. We appreciated it. Um okay. I know we talk about a lot of tough things, okay, on this podcast. We do the hot gossip, we give you the tough news, and we give it in a way that we hope is accessible, etc. What I do want to just give an additional sort of heads up, for example, to those of you who are listening or watching, we're gonna get gross. Okay, it's gonna get real gross. Um, so I woke up this morning. I thought I'm gonna look at the news. Which, is
Very bold.
generally not it's very bold. It was a bold move, but I made it. I thought, we're gonna record. I should see what's happening in the news. And
Mhm.
I will tell you the top US agriculture story today was about a little fly. A little fly. It's not the typical fly that you might see hanging around at your picnic or whatever. It's called a New World Screwworm Fly. Now,
Sounds delightful.
it's as disgusting as it sounds. You're like, somebody who named that was like, this is going to be gross. And that is correct. Okay. So, so the reason that this fly is so important is that, so most flies, almost all flies, they like dead things. So if there's like a dead animal in the woods or whatever, flies will be like, "Hey, that's a great meal for me and my family. Let's all
Mm,
go hang out there." And
mhm.
maybe we'll lay some eggs in the meat, if you will.
This
Okay?
really is gross. Okay, carry on.
I mean, yeah, it's gnarly. So this particular fly has an unusual feature, which is why it's the top agriculture news piece today, is that it is a parasitic fly. And unlike those other flies, it actually relies on the living flesh
Oh,
of an
fun.
animal to lay its eggs. And that's disgusting. Okay. And not only is it disgusting, it's very dangerous. And
Mm,
so this can be really problematic when these infestations happen, um, especially amongst, it doesn't impact like food or whatever in terms of it's just like if an animal has a wound, they can lay eggs in this wound,
mhm,
and then that's how it ends up spreading to other animals,
mm,
and it can spread to humans. So if
mm.
you are a human with an open wound, this is something that can unfortunately happen to you. So the life cycle of these little guys, they lay eggs, they require, like I said, like the flesh of an animal. Each
Living flesh.
fem Literally living flesh, which again, like, I feel like it's like such a spooky topic. I feel like
Mhm.
this could be, this isn't timed right for a Halloween episode, but, um, so they so the reason that this is a big deal, so this has been a problem we used to have these flies here in the United States until the 1960s. They were successfully eradicated through strategies to get rid of these flies, and it had mostly been pushed down to um, South America, and which I guess is another place where they tend to live. And it's been moving north, and there was a big crisis at the southern border of Mexico almost a full year ago. So last July in 2025, a bunch of farmers and ranchers in Chiapas, working with veterinarians and health officials, were trying to eradicate it. Well, unfortunately, the fly has continued to do what it's going to do.
Mhm.
We now have the first recognized case in the United States, in Texas, in an area just outside of Uvalde. It was identified, I believe, in a town called La Pryor. And so there is a quarantine now around that area. But this is scary. There's a lot of ranching that happens in Texas. And so this is a real threat to ranchers' work and to these animals in this area, as well as to human beings in this area. So, again, so gross. Um,
I mean, the main threat, it sounds like, is to livestock,
yes,
right?
yes. And because any livestock that have, it doesn't take a large wound for a small fly to be able to take advantage. And then once the eggs have been laid apparently in this area, each female fly lays about 100 eggs, and then you have 100 flies, and then those are going to
Mhm.
lay eggs, and so the cycle can happen pretty fast. And so this can get out of control very quickly, without this work done. So one of the main strategies that is typically used, and this is part of what was being used in Mexico,
Mhm.
is to use it's called a sterile fly technique. And this is also something that's used, for example, with mosquitoes. And so you try to release a lot of sterile
Mhm.
flies, so sterile males in particular, because the males will go and try to fertilize the eggs of lots of these flies. And so by um, creating sterile male flies, the
Mhm.
eggs that are laid by the females are not able to reproduce.
Mhm.
And so this is a
Mhm.
way to to prevent like the widespread um, just mass increase in the number of flies in an area. Um, and so because we're leaning into the gross this week, there is a image that I will share. I'll share a link to some work that the Associated Press put out last year. And there is literally, it's a 2024 photo from Panama, of literally an entire huge, like, I don't know, it looks like a liter container that you could dump. And they're just dumping out fly larvae onto
Ooh.
a tray, and apparently they're all sterile. So right now, my understanding is that there is one sterile fly facility. So there's these special facilities that help make these flies. Um, there's another one that's going to be opened in the United States to try to really ramp up production of these
The
sterile
sterile
flies.
flies. Mhm.
Yeah. Now, what I saw this morning the piece that I read this morning was in the Texas Tribune, and it's interesting because I'll be honest, I don't know enough about agriculture in Texas to understand what the background for of this
Mhm.
gentleman's views. A representative from the USDA's National Veterinary Service Laboratories, Secretary Brooke Rollins, was the person who confirmed the case in Texas. What's a little wild is that Rollins, literally just the day before this case was confirmed, there was a lawmaker in Texas who said, "Oh, there's a case right outside of
Mhm.
Uvalde. It's basically only a mile outside of Uvalde." Now, is that exactly true? Not necessarily, but Rollins had said, like, "Oh, that's wrong. That's not what's happening."
Mm.
And so it's a little awkward now, one day later, to be like, "Just kidding. It's not that far from Uvalde." Um, but this is being the fact that this has made it into the US is being blamed on you know, this is the quote from Rollins. He said, he blamed the spread of the screw tape towards the US Mexico border on the quote, open border policies of the last administration and the resulting illicit cattle movement. Um,
Wait. So sorry. So he's
yeah, go
blaming
ahead.
human immigration, then bringing along with them. Implicit in his suggestion there, the humans then are bringing with them quote unquote illegal cattle, and then that's the source. That's his justification of what's happened here.
That was the message that he
Okay.
had.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Um, and so it's interesting. So there was apparently another case in Florida where there was a horse that was being shipped from Argentina to Florida. I don't know, it must be a really fancy horse. And apparently that horse was identified to have this fly, but like during the regular inspection process that happens when animals are brought.
Hmm.
Um, so it's a little unclear to me why he's claiming that those things are not happening along the border. And anyway, I assume that we're all going to learn a lot more about the cattle trade, I guess. TBD.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, we in the United States, in Texas, took measles and we gave that to a bunch of people in Mexico and we gave
Hmm.
them an outbreak. So I just also think that we should probably not be so nationalistic about, I don't know, public health stuff where, listen, the fly knows no borders. Okay.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, and this has come up now with the Ebola outbreak in Africa as well, as the U.S. has been like,
Oof.
oh, people can't come back here, even if they're U.S. citizens. They can't come back here. They have to go to Kenya, which is absurd. But also, people in other countries trying to close their borders. Like, as you said, public health does not respect political boundaries. And what's likely to happen when we close borders is that people just kind of find their way around. It's not, you don't stop people from traveling. You just now can't screen them or provide support to them because they're doing it in a way that you're not aware is happening. I did also just want to point out that Doge, which is my favorite government
And
agency,
can you remind people what Doge stands for because they've probably repressed it by now?
that would be fair. The Department of Government Efficiency, run
Mm.
by Elon Musk, um, last year, if folks may recall, he went on stage with a chainsaw because he's getting rid of so much stuff because he's going to save so much money. Meanwhile, by the way, our deficit is now more than our GDP, so that worked really well. Anyway, Doge last year cut funding for a project dedicated to monitoring and containing the New World Screwworm in Central America.
What?
Yeah, isn't
What?
that so cool? And this is I'm just
You don't
connecting these.
say.
Yeah, shocking,
Huh.
I know.
Huh.
But this is the problem with the so-called America First policy in the which they aren't even doing America First, but this idea that they've sold to voters that they're doing America First things is that actually supporting prevention programs in other places is America First. That is how you protect cattle here, how you protect people here, how you protect this country, how you protect the world. That's why the phrase global health exists. I mean, we are all related. And that's why the WHO exists. And that's why the US has historically been such a strong supporter of the World Health Organization. It's not just because we're such an altruistic country here, just spending lots of money to support other people. It's because there are specific benefits to the folks who live here in the United States to carry out these programs all over the world. Many of those programs having been associated with USAID, which of course was nearly completely destroyed by Elon Musk, resulting in at least hundreds of thousands of deaths. Anyway, all that to say,
It's
there's this misconception that spending money elsewhere is only to help people elsewhere. And I just want to remind folks that we live in a capitalist society. Nobody is doing anything just because it's the nice thing to do. I mean, I shouldn't say nobody, but governments are not doing things because it's the nice thing to do. They're doing it because of the benefit to themselves and to their people. And that's something that the folks in our current government seem not to understand. I mean, they're not particularly sophisticated as far as I can tell. Anyway.
I mean, Arghavan, I just think that this really highlights how the word efficiency has really been mangled, because I mean, just hear me out, okay? I think it was pretty efficient for us to be like, well, let's spend a little money. Hardly anything compared to what we're spending on a dang war. I'll tell you that
Mhm.
much.
Mhm.
Like, what if we just were like, I don't know, let's try to keep things basically good here
Mhm. Mhm.
by being efficient with our investments. And it turns
Mhm.
out that instead, if you just say, no, it's inefficient, stop spending all that money, only spend it on war, the outcomes are not great.
Yeah, you mean, a war that no one wanted is not helping us?
Turns out. Turns out.
Turns
I
out.
mean,
Who could have predicted?
well, and the other thing, and again, I do not know enough about uh, cattle and the transit of cattle across the U.S. Mexico border, and so this person saying that that's why this happened, like I remain open to the idea that that may be correct. Um, but it also, I suspect, because when I hear about what happened in Florida previously, where the case, now granted, it's a little harder to move a horse from Argentina across an ocean, um, but like if we had the systems in place to do inspections the way that we should, then this should be something that we can catch
Mm.
with an open border. It
Mhm.
shouldn't actually, I mean, having lived in Los Angeles and lived near the border, like there's all sorts of inspections that happen.
Mhm.
I've had my car inspected many times to make sure I'm not smuggling human beings or oranges or whatever. And, it just seems like the idea that the open border itself is the fundamental problem here seems to
It
very
defies
much
belief.
simplify the explanation.
Yeah. Well, and it
Um,
allows for continued xenophobia and
yeah.
placing the blame of everything that's wrong in this country on immigrants.
So for people in Texas who are like around the quarantine site, the advice that's being made is like for people to really inspect their animals, make sure that they're not seeing this particular fly, to report anything that they may see, in order to just take care and try to prevent harm to animals as well as having a massive outbreak. I did, for completeness sake, I thought that I would let people know what the symptoms are as in a human in
Mm.
case you wanted to know. I hope that no humans meet up with this new world screwworm fly because it
Mhm.
sounds gnarly.
Mhm.
Um, However, the CDC says symptoms can include feeling maggots, larvae, move, or seeing maggots within the skin, wound, or sore, or in the ears, nose, eyes, or mouth.
Oh, goodness. This sounds terrible.
Painful skin wounds or sores that worsen within a few days. A foul smelling odor from the site of the infestation. Bleeding from open sores. Bacteria can also infect wounds where the NWS magnets are present and may cause infection that can lead to symptoms like fever or chills. So, folks, I mean, I don't think that you need a doctor to tell you this, but in case you do, if you notice larvae in a wound, please, and you don't have to know what kind of larva it is. Please, I beg of you, go seek medical attention from a qualified professional because that is not okay. That's not okay.
Well, I'm
Absolutely
glad you clarified that it's not normal or okay to have larvae in your wound. Thank you for telling our audience that.
just in case people needed permission, I just want you. Get that out of there.
Yeah, that sounds terrible. I do think that the last time we had a case of this new world screwworm in this country was brought in by a human, actually, like sometime last year, I
Mm.
think I was reading. Um, anyway, and that person is fine. But so it can happen. It can happen, but hopefully it will not. And hopefully this one sounds like there's one case that's been identified. Hopefully they'll be able to get it under control. Um, because otherwise, I believe in the past that when there have been outbreaks of this new world screwworm, like back, as you said, before the 60s, that then you lose cattle. And then so beef prices go up. And as we all know, I think the price of food, all kinds of foods, including beef, right now is already higher than many of us can afford. So I would hate to see
Absolutely.
that get even more exacerbated by something that was being taken care of before we got so efficient.
We're so efficient.
Yeah. For them.
Well, anyway, listen, I appreciate you having the bravery to let me talk about this screw worm fly.
I honestly did not know how disgusting that was gonna be, so thank you for sharing that with us. Um,
You're
I've
like,
seen
I wouldn't say yes in the future, but here we are.
no, I've seen some of the headlines, but I hadn't had a chance to read, more about it, so thank you for sharing that with us. I was hoping I could talk about a topic that, is not as, like, physically revolting, but is also related to so-called efficiency.
Oh. Oh,
Um,
in a
yeah,
bad way?
in a bad way, exactly. How that word has been used to destroy so much. So, specifically, I want to talk about these new regulations, proposed regulations that were put out by the Office of Management and Budget, OMB,
Mhm. Mhm.
last week related to federal funding. And I want to talk specifically, it turns out that these regulations apply to any federal funding. So, grants that go to nonprofits that do work around supporting unhoused people or people who help or like who run domestic violence shelters or any kind of organization that you can think of, public health departments, like any organization that you can think of that gets money from the federal government could be affected by these proposed regulations. But I want to focus on science and research funding. um, I think it's the impacts again are really broad, but I think this is the easiest way for me as an academic who's had federal funding to talk about these proposed changes. There are quite a few things. It's like a 400-page document. I have not read this document, but I want to point people to, and we'll have a link in the show notes to Dr. Elizabeth Ganexi, who has an excellent summary of she did actually read the whole thing, and she has an excellent summary, and she has multiple posts now actually about these proposed regulations. But I want to highlight the things that I find most concerning. So the very first one is an idea that's been thrown out already by this administration, which is that political appointees would be the ones deciding what gets funded and what doesn't. So, in case folks don't know, what has happened in the past is, the NIH, for example, would put out a call for grants related to a specific thing, like treatment of CLL, for example. I'm just picking a random thing.
Mhm.
And then researchers would submit proposals that are aimed at addressing the things that are raised in that call for proposals. And then other scientists who work in that area would read these various proposals and then evaluate them. And then
Mhm.
together they have something called a study section where they discuss the top proposals and then determine which ones they think should be funded. Now, historically, it's not the word of the study section was not necessarily the final say. It would then go to a second round, which is an advisory council, which is a group of people who then look through all of the recommendations from the study sections. Um, and then, usually my understanding is those get approved unless there's some major issue. But now what they're suggesting is that peer review can still happen, but it's not binding. So even the top scoring or most highly recommended proposals might not get funded just because they're going to be reviewed by a political appointee. And a political appointee, as it sounds, is not a scientist. It's not someone who understands the field in which they are reviewing applications. And in fact, they are going to be looking at whether these applications align with supposed priorities of the administration, which also are not scientists. Like the president, I think it's pretty obvious, is not a scientist. Our head of HHS, RFK Jr., not a
Can you
scientist.
can we take a moment though to imagine what it would be like if Trump did a peer review? I
I don't
mean,
think he would read it. First of all, he would be like, it's boring. Did you see that he said this week that the Iran war was boring? Like he was like, I don't care if they negotiate, if they're tired of negotiating, whatever. I'm bored anyway. Um, Completely insulting and horrific for
I'm
everyone who's
just
affected
saying
by it.
if he put the amount of effort into it that he puts into his tweets, he could be a really killer reviewer too.
No, I think all he would say is like, this is trash. Anyway, so the point is that there's these people who are not scientists who are setting the priorities and then also deciding ultimately who gets funded. So that's
Mhm.
extremely problematic, right? We have people who don't know what they're talking about making
Mhm.
decisions about the direction of science in this country. In addition, they are trying to codify their right to terminate grants at any time for any reason. So obviously, this caused a lot of havoc and chaos last year when soon after the inauguration, they started just terminating research grants left and right, including mine. And that was really problematic for many reasons, clinical trials that had to be stopped or paused, or people who could not support the trainees in their lab anymore or could not support the employees in their lab anymore. Anyway, just like massive chaos. um, and it is worth noting a lot of those grants were reinstated because there was a lawsuit that we've talked about before that said those terminations were unlawful. But it remains the case that there were disruptions to a lot of people's work, obviously a lot of stress. And then there's people like me whose funds were never restored and research is and whose research is being really fully threatened at this time. Anyway, so in the past, prior to this administration, terminations had been pretty rare. They would be for things like research misconduct or sexual misconduct. Um, but now, what they're saying in these proposed regulations is that they can just terminate grants anytime. So even after they give you a
They
5-year grant
they
to
want to
work
turn
on.
like all of grants into an at will
Exactly.
firing. Jesus.
Exactly. But it doesn't make any sense because, like, you fund a researcher, say, for 5 years to do a project on diabetes. They hire staff, right? They buy machinery, reagents, whatever. It depends on the type of research, but they will invest that money in the research. And then you decide at year 2 that, like, you don't care about that type of research or that specific problem, in this case, diabetes, because that's not the priority of the administration, and you're just going to stop that research. So not only does that lab lose funding, do people who were hired with that funding lose their jobs, but also however much money was invested in that research is now lost.
Yep.
So I mean, that's like our grant, over $1 million had been spent on our grant before we were terminated. And we are doing the best we can with what we had at that time to try to do something productive, but it's a waste of
Mhm. Mhm.
taxpayer dollars to just then pull the rug out from under people. It's not nobody can sustain a scientific lab this way. You have to be able to plan.
But to be fair, Trump doesn't want to fund research with taxpayer dollars. He wants to fund a war and a slush fund.
Well, he wants to fund himself and his family. That's what I have surmised from his actions. Anyway, okay, that's the grants being terminated anytime is hugely destabilizing to research labs.
Yeah.
Then the next thing I want to talk about is that new grants. So, there are new granting programs, like I said, these calls for proposals that happen all the time. Um, new grants must New grant programs must align with the administrative um, policies and priorities. So, again, not just existing things that are being reviewed, but anything new that's going to happen has to be in line with the priorities of people who are not scientists and don't know what would be the best use of resources. Then there's a section on scientific communication. So, part of the whole reason we do research is like to learn new things, and then we share what we've learned with the rest of the scientific community. That's how we make advancements and build on other people's work. That's how we create new knowledge. It's really, really important. And what they have decided is that in these proposed regulations is that any conference that someone wants to attend, they have to have pre-approval from the federal government before they can go. So that's like, imagine with my grant, we submit an abstract to a conference about the research that we've done with this funding. It gets accepted. Now I have to go ask for permission from the federal government to use the funds they've already given me to go to this conference to present that work. And as we all know, having to interact with the government in the best of times is not really something anybody is keen to do. So that's a huge block on the ability to communicate scientifically. And it's not just about conferences, they're also restricting memberships to professional societies. They're also, this is also particularly concerning, that they basically said that they won't really allow these funds to be used to pay for publication fees. So if folks don't know, previously it has been the case that if you're doing any work funded by the federal government, you're obligated to make that work accessible. And so you can do that through their own publication service, or you can do that by publishing through an open access journal. Open access journals are not paywalled. And that's what's really great about them, but they charge authors thousands of dollars to publish in these journals.
Let me tell you,
So,
I recently got a paper published open access because I really wanted it to be open access. It cost over
mhm,
$5,000.
mhm. And so
Brutal.
now they're saying it's essentially unallowable to use the federal funding for that. They say you can apply for exceptions, whatever. So basically, though, they don't want you to do that. So that's going to make it harder for people to publish their work in a way that people can access it.
The most
Um,
inefficient system I've heard of, by the way.
yeah,
We approved you, we gave you this money, and now we're gonna make it so that it is the most inefficient possible way to use it.
yeah, absolutely. Um, they also are restricting international collaborations, which is something that they started this year. I don't have the full list of countries, but with a number of countries, they're saying you cannot collaborate with anybody in those countries. Um, it will not surprise anyone to hear that they have reiterated their ban on DEI or DEIA or so-called gender ideology or anything related to gender affirming care. Um, so there are many other points. I think in that essay, there's probably like 16 or 17. I don't recall how many. So there are other things, but those are the highlights to me that are the biggest red flags in terms of how it's going to change science and the conduct of science if these proposed regulations are adopted. They're basically, their main thrust is for the government to be able to control what we do, when we do it, how we do it. And the best comparison I think that we have is Lysenkoism from the USSR, where they put into a position of power someone who did not have any expertise in agriculture, and that led to famine and a lot of people needlessly dying because this person didn't believe in science and so was doing all sorts of weird things that did not work. And so that's the risk that we run in having politicians determine what type of work should be
Mhm,
funded, giving the final say on what specific projects are funded, and then restricting our ability to communicate with each other about
mhm.
what we found. And I want to just put this in the context of the recent American Society of Clinical Oncology meeting that just happened, and folks may have seen some pretty amazing news. Like they published, or there was a talk about, and then also simultaneously published in the New England Journal, a new medication for pancreatic cancer that
Mhm,
both doubles the life expectancy compared to other chemotherapy and also doubles the disease free survival. That's amazing. I mean, pancreatic cancer, as someone who did general surgery residency, I took care of so many patients who died from pancreatic
yeah,
cancer. The 5-year survival is just above 10%.
mhm,
It's a terrible disease. It's a death sentence. And so
yeah.
doubling the amount of time people have with their family is huge.
Yeah.
How does that happen? It happens because we allow scientists to do their work without some politician somewhere meddling and saying, no, that's not how we should be spending our money. And the other major one that I want to point out is melanoma, where there is an mRNA based vaccine that's been developed that increased, I think also nearly doubled, but I will fact check that in the show notes, but increased the um, time to recurrence for melanoma. And
So,
we
and just
have
for people who don't
Mhm.
understand what that means, if you've had a melanoma, this treatment would make it so that your likelihood of getting another melanoma would not happen as soon. You would have many more time
Yeah,
before
you
you
have
would
more time.
potentially get it again.
Exactly. And melanoma is another one, like depending on the subtype that a person gets, like some of them are really terrible, and that's also a death sentence. So anything that can help people with these cancers that have been so difficult to treat is really miraculous. So we
Mhm.
are seeing these kinds of breakthroughs because of the investment in science. And if we want to see continued breakthroughs like these, then we need to continue to fund
Mhm.
scientists to do the work that they know is the most important, and going to have the most benefit, not what RFK Jr. or Donald J. Trump thinks is going to have the benefit.
Well, and I think, uh, you mentioned, some non-scientific politician who's like making these decisions, and I think it's important for people to understand that the person who is currently the director of the OMB is Russell Vought, who's a
Mhm.
budget hawk. He's one of the main architects of the Right Wing Heritage Foundation's Project
Yep.
2025. So when you're talking about Project 2025, you are talking about Russell Vought, and this is the kind of person who is now in charge of the budget. And he it's very clear, when you read Project 2025, like he wants to restructure the entire
Yeah.
federal government. And this is just one of the really, really problematic and terrible ways that he is choosing to do that. And the other part that I would say is there is this, and Elizabeth Genexi, her piece that just came out today is all about the disinformation. Sorry, and today we're recording this on June 4th. You all are listening to it on June 5th or afterwards. Um, but her most recent piece is all about the disinformation campaign around this budget,
Mm.
and obviously the group that coordinated Project 2025, they have deep pockets. They have a big, we talked last week about sort of the social structures and the disinformation structures that are really built to really spread this false narratives, lies about what's happening. And so, for example, a spokesperson from the OMB said, this is a quote from them, and it is not a true statement. Federal grants were already politicized to promote a far left agenda, which I think is hilarious. Quote, funding went to projects like drag shows to report diversity in Ecuador and transgender experiments on mice. That ends now with this new rule. The Trump administration will bring transparency to the grant making process and ensure taxpayer dollars are spent wisely. So this is an explicitly disinformation piece. So like
Mhm.
there were no drag shows funded in Ecuador. There was claims made about transgender mice. First of all, mice cannot be transgender. There were certainly scientific studies being done on mice studying hormones.
Mm.
And, the study of hormones is an incredibly important thing that's been going on for like 100 years. But
Mhm.
when they say things like this, they're just trying to make people upset and trying to use, as we've commented many times on this podcast, trying to make people feel a certain kind of way in a negative way about transgender people
Yep.
and using science as a way to try to discredit the value of those human beings, as well as to try to discredit the genuine scientific labor being done with federal funding.
Absolutely. It's another part of their horrific attacks on trans people.
So, I mean, it's all ridiculous. This has all been laundered through the language of the Heritage Foundation, of Project 2025. And these foolish things are being repackaged as though they are truth. And of course, in opposition to actual truth generating activities, which is science.
Yeah. I I'm not surprised that they're actively operating a disinformation campaign to try to get support for what it is that they're doing. Um, but this is, I mean, I don't know that we can overestimate the impact that this would have on our ability to conduct science. It feels catastrophic to me and to a lot of other people. And I don't, with everything going on, I don't know how much people outside of science are paying attention to this. But importantly, there is an open comment period happening right now until July 13th.
Mhm.
And if you go to regulations.gov and look for OMB 2026/0034, we'll put a link. Um, that will take you to the page where you can write a comment. Or you can go to Stand Up for Science. So, if folks aren't familiar, Stand Up for Science is a nonprofit that has been doing a lot of advocacy related to all these attacks on science for the last year and a half. So, it's standupforscience.net. They have on their homepage a link to where you can enter your that same information, and it'll go directly to regulations.gov. Um, and there are templates that exist if people are like, I don't know what I'm supposed to say. There are templates that exist. What I've heard though from a number of people is that when for this specific purpose, when you have the same exact comment, it's not considered a unique comment. And so it is ideal if folks can actually write their own comments. It doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be detailed. And Elizabeth Ganexi, again, has a separate essay about what you might want to say and how you might want to format a comment. So she has a full step by step thing that, again, we'll link to that. And you can do as much or as little with it as you want. If you're part of an organization, you can encourage your organization, whether that's an academic center or it's a professional organization or any group that you're affiliated with. They also can submit comments. I know there have already been thousands of comments, which is fantastic. But the more, the better, because not only is it possible that we could stop this, but also these comments apparently can be used for lawsuits in the
Yes.
future. So, really
So
important.
one of the things that's just on your comment of, not submitting identical things to other
Mhm, mhm,
people,
mhm.
making them when you're submitting an individual comment, making it personal, or signing on to a larger comment from a group, is that the government actually uses software to sort through all of these. And so if you have 1,000 of the same comment, it's all treated as one comment.
Mhm.
And so this is where, if you are a patient who has benefited from, recent scientific discoveries from NIH, funded projects, which, by the way, I mean, our scientific discovery process is part of what leads to private companies being able to come up with new drugs and do all sorts of things. So there's a ton of work that gets done that maybe doesn't sound like it's that important, but it's all part of the building blocks of our entire country's scientific and discovery infrastructure.
So, yeah, I mean, this is something I talked about a while back. There are a lot of scientific discoveries that I think if you put them in front of like RFK Jr. or someone like that, they'd be like, we don't need to study the saliva of lizards or whatever, because that's where GLP-1 came from. And but like you can imagine that fits right into the type of things this administration likes to put out as waste of government dollars. But GLP-1s have been extraordinarily life-changing for millions of people around the world. And that
So
research, go
are
ahead.
you saying that a teeny tiny piece of research that based on a headline, you can't assume that you know everything you need to know about the research?
Correct. Or what might come. I mean, that's part of the beauty of science is that even the people doing that research don't necessarily know what's going to come of that. There's so much that we just can't predict. And that's what's so very cool about science. Like you um find something really interesting. You're like, huh, what does that even mean? And then you like look into it more and you design more experiments. And then however many years down the line, you have GLP-1s that are changing the world. Then we have in the United States for the first time seen a decrease in the number of people with overweight and obesity after decades of continuously rising rates. That's amazing. And I have no doubt that if Elon Musk or RFK Jr. or someone like that had been asked, hey, should we fund this work that started it all? They would have said, no, that's a waste of taxpayer dollars.
Well, folks, we will put links for you to leave your own comment on your own experiences. We know there's a lot of scientists and healthcare workers who listen to the show. We also know that there's a lot of you who have directly and personally benefited from the work that has come from this federal funding. And so please leave a public comment, make your voice heard, and we'll send you a bunch of links to give you some, little guidance.
Absolutely. Oh, and I just wanted to, in case there's any people sensitive about lizards, it was the Gila monster, the saliva of a Gila monster. So I don't want to offend
Oh,
any
oh.
people who are big reptile fans. I'm not really good at the reptilian categories, but it was from the Gila monster.
Um,
That's where they got
Gila
the.
monsters, they're like weird and cool.
I believe you. I know
Yeah.
nothing.
I have a couple of anyway, they're wild. Okay.
All right. Um. So I think, are we ready for our take two and call me in the morning segment?
I mean, there's never been a better time.
Yeah, we've talked about screw worms and we've talked about the destruction of science. So it needs something a little uplifting. What would you recommend for folks this week?
So I came across a video that I was very amused by, which is a gentleman who is a scientist that studies crystallography. He's a scientist of crystals, and I believe he's called Nature Thought or Nature Thought. I don't know how he pronounces his handle, but he did an entire video on non-standard healing crystals. He said he's fascinated by people who think crystals are for healing,
Mm,
and so he did a wonderful collection of really useful crystals. Starting with, for example, Lexapro, which is a crystal of escitalopram. He also covered stainless steel. He
mm.
covered bricks. And I thought that was really clever. I love a clever scientist, if you will. And I thought it was fun. And I like that, there are some crystals that really have a lot of science backed benefit to them. And I love that.
Yeah, they're just not like the big purple and pink ones that people like Spencer Pratt are buying.
Sure. I mean, those are beautiful. They're beautiful, and maybe they provide you with some spiritual connection of some kind, and that's cool. You do you. I No shade. I think crystals are beautiful. Um, and I like that Lexapro is a crystal. I think these are both great. These are wonderful. Um, the other the other video that I will put in the show notes because it gave me great joy is a woman whose handle is Meltop317, and she introduced me not to trad wives, which we've talked about before, but trad lifting. And
Hmm.
by that, I do mean lifting extremely heavy weights. And she is doing it in a fit and flare dress, and she looks amazing, and she makes it really funny. So I will put a link in the show notes so that you too can enjoy trad lifting.
Women in male dominated fields, as they say. Um, well, I wanted to share something pretty amusing that's been happening on Twitter. I know Twitter is a cesspool and no one should use it. I agree. And yet, that is
But
where
you're
a
doing
lot
the
of
heroic labor of checking.
yes, and there's still unfortunately a lot of people who are there and not elsewhere. So, the real Twitter winner of the last week or so has been very surprising. It's Hunter Biden.
Oh.
Um, and he created an account, and I honestly thought it was fake because I was like,
Mm.
"What is Hunter Biden doing creating a Twitter account in this year, 2026?" And I just waited, and you know what? He has not disappointed. It has been
Oh.
really fascinating to watch him interact with folks. So I'm just going to give you a few of the highlights. So he had a post about um, I don't know if folks have seen some of the things that are being said about like his mom's new memoir. Jill Biden has a new book
Mm.
out, and Jake Tapper has once again been focused on Joe Biden's mental health. As a reminder, Joe Biden is not the president of this country, and there is a man who is president who also seems to have some serious cognitive issues. I should have said that. Sorry, cognitive issues, not mental health, but cognitive issues. And so after Jake Tapper had posted some more attacks on Joe Biden, um, Hunter had posted about many corrupt things that Jared and Ivanka and Don Jr. and Eric have been doing. And anyway, in response, to that. Some of these things I'm going to tell you have been in response to that. So one of them was, oh, and by the way, I should say for context, people made a big deal about him selling paintings, okay, while his father was president. And so he says, but you want to be worried about my paintings? So he said in multiple places that he made like 200 some odd thousand total over the 4 years. Okay. But the amounts that we're talking about with Jared and Ivanka and all the things they're doing, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, sometimes like
Did
Eric's.
I did
Mhm.
I ever talk about this on the podcast of the graphs showing, like, the outrageous amounts of money that they've made?
I don't think it's a good question. I don't think we've talked about that. Um, but
I'm gonna find it. I'm
we
gonna
should.
find it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, but like he's talking about, like in his post, he's talking about Eric's Israeli drone company that's going public for $1.5 billion, and Don Jr. getting backing to the tune of $620 million from the Pentagon for some, company that he's a part. Anyway, so he's saying in that context, like his paintings that he made like $200,000 off, people are concerned about. But so in response to his post, somebody said, "You sound bitter for someone who benefited from a stolen erection." Hunter said, "I've never stolen an erection in my life." That was one. Another one was somebody wrote to him, "Hunter, I'd vote for you, but even if you're sober, which is great, I would require at least one crack joke campaign ad to pledge my loyalty. I await your response." Hunter writes back, "How about let's take another crack with a Biden? Needs work, but the possibilities are endless." And somebody else, this is from a separate post that he had written about being sober for 7 years, which is a huge accomplishment.
Mhm.
Congratulations, Hunter, for that. Somebody wrote back, "Bullshit. That was your bag of Coke in the White House." And Hunter wrote back, "It most definitely was not. I would never have forgotten my drugs." So, you know, he's on a tear. It's a beautiful thing to watch. Um, I hope it continues. It's been amusing. I don't know. I don't know much about the guy, to be honest, but I've seen him do a couple of interviews recently where, I mean, he sure has been through a lot. And it seems like he's just doing the best he can at this moment to be moving forward. And yeah, I love to see him giving it to folks who are there clearly not in good faith. And he's won some of them over, it seems, actually, um, because you know, he's, as they say, a natural poster. And so I think that's it for this week's episode. If you didn't like what you heard, this has been the Plodcast podcast. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to The Present Illness, leave us a review, and tell your friends or people on the street. Anyone could benefit from listening.
You can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at The Present Illness to stay on top of all of our TPI-related news.
We will be back next week with more headlines, hot takes, and doom scrolling, hopefully wrapped in some laughs.
Until then, agitate, hydrate, take a nap, and we'll see you next time on The Present Illness. Production by Arghavan, Salles, and Alyssa Burgart. Editing by Alyssa Burgart. Social media by Arghavan, Salles. Original music by Joseph Uphoff. Don't take medical advice from random people on a podcast. This show's for informational purposes. It's meant to be fun, and it's certainly not medical advice. Please take your medical questions to a qualified professional. This podcast is our hobby, doesn't represent the opinions of our employers or anyone but ourselves.